Hey guys, so this is going to be a rather unusual video, and I usually try to avoid topics like this, mainly because I feel like I wouldn't be qualified to talk about those certain topics. However, I feel like I actually have somewhat of an opinion this time, since I've given it some thought. So I'm going to give a little bit of my take on the situation, and I kind of want to extend it to a larger theme. I should probably say before beginning, my goal is not to cancel or call out anyone. Twitter's already done enough of that. But merely take a somewhat objective, as much as I can, look on the situation. And while I will explain my viewpoint on this, I want to mainly spark some discussion surrounding the themes of the topic since I found it interesting. So, for those of you who don't know, KSI and Fundy got canceled. Most of you probably know who KSI is, and some of you probably know who Fundy is, but for those who don't, Fundy is a Minecraft YouTuber who I personally watch sometimes, and KSI is a massive YouTuber who I personally feel needs no introduction, so let's get into it. Apparently, another YouTuber, Quackity, was hosting a Jackbox stream, and he had a bunch of people like Wilbur Soot, James Charles, and of course Fundy and KSI on it. They were having a good time, just cracking jokes, the usual. The boys were getting together. But eventually, KSI and Fundy made a few jokes which could be and were considered by some to be insensitive and off color. Now, I'm not going to repeat the joke since I don't want to get canceled. No, but really, I don't need to do that. But for the sake of context, all you need to know is that the jokes had stuff to do with touching little kids and non-consensual intercourse. If you don't know what that is, ask your parents. No, don't ask your parents. You'll find. Never mind. Never mind. I'll start with my take. Personally, I don't think what they did was that wrong. After all, they were jokes, but I can definitely understand why people were upset over this. Now, this is where we start to consider some things, which people might not immediately consider when thinking about this, although I could be wrong. Maybe people did consider this. I don't know. First, I think it's important to note that very rarely will there be a situation in which something is absolutely 100% wrong and another thing is absolutely 100% right. Most things come down to philosophy and values. What is your philosophy? What do you value? Your experiences shape these things. It will most likely dictate how you view a situation. And I feel like this gets lost within conversations on the internet a lot, especially when it comes to cancel culture. Everyone's up in arms. They have their swords out. They're just fighting. It's like, I don't know. Everyone assumes they have the biggest dick. All right. So I've seen a few people talk about this, and they usually talk about what is right and wrong, but again, I feel like we have to consider some things. Let's broaden the discussion to humor in general. Humor is something that I've struggled with for a while. Yes, I know, I'm not that funny. You don't have to rub it in, that's kind of mean. No, but all jokes aside, I've kind of struggled with understanding when certain types of jokes are okay and when they aren't. I feel like throughout my life I've sort of bounced back and forth between saying, okay, insert edgy joke here is funny, and saying edgy jokes are never funny and should not be said. But here's the thing. Everything is contextual. Not everything is black and white. Most things actually are in a gray area, believe it or not. So let's look at it this way. You might be with your close group of friends and you have all the same sense of humor. You're cracking some lol W's, making some funnies about certain things, which I'm not gonna say again because I don't want to get canceled in the future. That some people might view as weird and inappropriate. But you're with your friends and you're allowed to say those things. No one cares. You've all shared certain experiences and have jokes on the inside jokes and everything. So again, no one really cares about the particulars of what you say. On the other hand, if you were with your grandparents, let's say, or hell, let's add the rest of your family in there, you might not joke about the same things. Now, it's important to know your audience. So, personally, I feel like it's important to recognize that some people might not take your jokes as lightheartedly. Does it make these jokes wrong? No. What will make it iffy is if they weren't jokes. The jokes themselves aren't necessarily the issue here. What the issue is here is not knowing your audience. You might make a joke or something you find pretty funny about a really terrible event to one person, and you both might get a chuckle. But make it to another person who just so happens to be affected by that event, and how you might want to apologize because you probably brought up some bad memory or something. So again, the jokes themselves aren't necessarily bad, you just have to know your audience. Now, we've talked about humor in a sort of personal context, but what about a public context? Some might say that what you say in private you shouldn't say in public, and some really don't care. What do you value? Again, I'll ask you that question. Authenticity or something else? Someone who values authenticity might say that private or public context, it doesn't really matter. You might make the same jokes, and in fact, you should make the same jokes you make in private in public, because it's more genuine, I guess. Other people would say that you should be inclusive and sensitive to everyone. Sure, it's possibly to be both, but if you have a dark sense of humor, then it can be quite hard to walk the line, and that's a fine line. So this leads me into branding. In entertainment, you might have some people who make their living off of making edgy and dark jokes. Branding is important because this is how you attract an audience. If you're known for making dark jokes, then your audience will most likely be built on people who like that kind of humor. This highlights something I see as an issue with the internet today, and I could be wrong, it's just something I personally see as an issue. Sometimes when I make these videos or I stream, I feel like I'm walking on like a minefield or eggshells. One second I'm just having fun playing video games. The next I might have set myself up for a cancellation in the future. I'll note here that cancellations don't really do anything most of the time, but they do definitely add stress to people. And sometimes they actually affect a person's career. But again, most of the time that doesn't really happen. Another thing I will note before I continue is that while some cancellations are definitely deserved, and I don't need to go over those, you can look at them yourselves. Most, I would say, are not. Now, what I would say if you ask me about whether or not it's all right to make dark jokes is that it should be fine. But again, we have to take branding into account. Do you want to be inclusive, or do you want to be known as someone who makes maybe more dark or edgy jokes? I personally don't really understand why whenever somebody makes a joke in public, people have to go on a righteous crusade to get them deplatformed. I can understand why it makes them upset, and that's okay. Everyone has a right to their emotions. What's important is how we act on these emotions. If you asked me, I'd say that if you don't like a joke that someone makes, then don't watch or listen to them. It's that simple. Of course, this really brings up another point, which is that it wasn't really KSI or Fundy's stream, but it was Quackity's stream. Since it is Quackity's stream, in this case, you probably won't be able to make the argument. That you shouldn't watch or listen to them, since it's not their stream and technically not their audience. I don't really know what to make of that, but you guys can let me know. I don't really have a take for that. But I'll wrap this up, since this video is already gone on long enough. I'll wrap this up with one last point. And there really isn't an answer to this, at least one that I found. But I guess that a chunk of this, if we're considering that the goal of cancellation is to deplatform someone, is should entertainers cater to audiences, or should the audiences watch entertainers that they enjoy? That doesn't really make sense, but I'll put it in other words. Should the entertainers know their audiences, or should the audiences know the entertainers? That makes a little more sense. I don't really know how else to explain it, but maybe somewhere in between. I don't know. At the end of the day, humor is subjective and a lot is contextual. Not everyone will find what one person finds as funny. There is a rule that I've heard that as long as something is more funny than it is offensive, it's fine. But this implies that humor is objective, and to a sense, it can be. But again, for the most part, humor is subjective, so there's no real way to gauge that. So I feel like you just kind of have to be conscious of your audience to an extent. No, this doesn't mean that anyone should be allowed to do anything that they want. I mean, then we'd all be fucked. I'm just one person, and I'm sure there are a lot of holes with my analysis of this topic, but let me know what you guys think. What do you think of cancel culture and cancellations? What do you think of dark humor? And anyways, I think that's going to be it for the video.